We will get started with today's Animal Care Welfare Wednesday webinar. Our guest speaker today is Lisa Pederson. She is a beef quality assurance specialist with North Dakota State Extension Service and NDSU's Dickinson Research Extension Center. She began her duties as the state's beef quality assurance specialist in the April of 1999. Lisa is responsible for the beef and dairy quality assurance programming for North Dakota's adult and youth audiences. Lisa attended Colorado State University, receiving bachelor degree in animal science and agriculture business, and a master's degree in farm and ranch management and livestock production. Livestock production is in Lisa's genetics. She's the fourth generation raised on her family's cow, calf, and sheep operation located near the southwestern Colorado town of Durango. Lisa is married to Chad, and along with his family ranch near north central South Dakota town of Firesteel, they raise registered and commercial red Angus cattle and registered quarter horses. And today, Lisa will be talking about bovine emergency response and what to do in the event of an accident. So Lisa, I will kick it off to you.
Well, thank you all very much. If you have questions, type them in the chat thing, and I will try to watch that. If I don't catch it, Kim, will you let me know if there's one there?
Yes.
Okay, and you can just ask, sorry?
We can answer the questions as we go or at the end. Either way is fine. Please do use the chat button as everybody is muted.
Why don't we ask them as we go if we can? And I'm an extrovert, and so this is really hard not to have a two-way conversation for me, but I understand with technology that sometimes doesn't work the best. So I'm going to say hi to my friend and neighbor, Adele Hardy. I've known Adele for a long time. So I was asked today to speak about the Bovine Emergency Response Program. And this is a program that probably is not correctly named as we look back on it. It's a program that is about dealing with transportation incidents and accidents that involve livestock, but in particular cattle. What we have learned is that the things that are taught in this program can be applied to most species of animals, and you'll see that towards the end of the program. So I'll talk, if I can make this all work, a little bit about what the program's about. We're going to start with a video here. And this is a video that was taken in Russia, and we borrowed from YouTube. But I think it shows some of the things that can happen that we rarely are ready for. And I will try to mute it as well because it's really loud. And so you'll see that there's cars going down the street in Russia, and if you'll watch this truck right here and see what happens, they swerve and roll. And where I was raised, this is a pretty typical way to haul cattle in stock racks and in trucks, open trucks like that. In the mountains, I don't think that's so typical here in the plains. We typically have more enclosed vehicles, but even some of our trailers today are open like this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our current situation in the beef industry. As most of you know, I think probably that our beef industry is a very diverse, non-integrated industry, which is totally opposite of most of our other industries in this country, especially pork and poultry. There was no uniform plan in the U.S. for any of our species when we started in this endeavor, and so we looked at beef quality assurance as maybe a way to advance this effort. One of the things that we do know is that every jurisdiction in the country deals with loose animals on the highway all the time. And as we're learning, most jurisdictions actually deal with incidents that involve livestock that are being hauled at some point or another. And at any given time, there are about 100,000 head of cattle on the road and moving through this country. And that's just the slaughter. That doesn't include cattle, moving from ranch to pasture or pasture to auction market to feed yard, and those type of things. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the need that we identified and how we got here. And so I'm going to back up a little bit. About 10 years ago, David Newman was a graduate student with us under Eric Berg at North Dakota State University, and he and his wife were living south of Fargo, and a load of Canadian slaughter cows overturned, and they could not find a veterinarian to come euthanize some of these cows. And so David came into the department one day, and he said to our then extension veterinarian, Charlie Stoltnow, and I said, I thought you guys cared about the welfare of livestock. And we were like, what in the world are you talking about? And they could not get a vet to come euthanize these cows. And so as we looked at the accident report, actually a firefighter had euthanized 2 of the cows with an axe. And we knew that that was not good. And we endeavored in this, first of all, to teach first responders correct euthanasia of livestock. Well, not too long after that, after we had started in this, probably 2 or 3 years later, a semi-load of cattle was hit head-on by a pickup truck that crossed the median of the road. It was Highway 281 near Carrington, and hit that semi-truck head-on. The semi was hauling Canadian rib-branded feeder calves, which you'll understand why that becomes important here in a minute. The pickup truck had a ramp on the box, and it was kind of like a carnival act type thing, and it had a sleeper cab on it as well. And that ramp on the box actually penetrated the sleeper cab of the semi, decapitated the driver of the semi. Both drivers were fatalities and were laying in the road. Fire had consumed the pickup, and the brakes on the trailer of the semi, the cattle pot, had caught on fire. And so the truck was on fire, burning cattle inside. And the semi-trailer of the truck hauling cattle was traveling east, but after the collision, it was in the ditch of the westbound lane. And the dispatcher called our livestock unit in Carrington at our Carrington Research Extension Center and asked if they could bring a trailer and a couple of panels to help with a truck accident that was hauling cattle. That was all the information they were given. And when they arrived with a 4-horse bumper pull trailer and 4 panels and cattle on fire and 2 fatalities and people not knowing what to do, they realized that there was a major problem. One of the major issues was that emergency personnel would not deal with the fatalities until the cattle were dealt with. And that became a big deal. And so you can see the schematic here and how this all laid out. Let's see if I'm smart enough to run, if I can find the little pointers. Tell me, somebody, can you see my arrow here?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. So here was the pickup truck, and here was the semi, and here were cattle, and these were the fatalities laying out on the road. And so these guys who were having to deal with the cattle were having to walk around decapitated fatalities on the road. And so it was a pretty bad situation. The big issue became that these were Canadian cattle on a sealed truck. And so first response, I think, was going along pretty well. People were euthanizing cattle, these calves, and trying to get them out of the truck until our East River State brand inspector showed up. And he's a deputized person. And he said, well, by all means, we cannot do this until, because this is a sealed truck and these are Canadian cattle and we cannot enter a sealed truck. And so he put the entire operation on hold, and it ended up taking almost 18 hours to resolve the situation. As a result of the trauma I think people experienced in that event, the 3 highway patrolmen have left the force. They lost most of their volunteer firefighting crew over it. They really had no follow-up debriefing sessions. The crew at our research center, only one of those people will even talk about it publicly. And so I think it was really a major, as I would put it, disaster. And we really, I think, set forth, that really put us in place that we knew we had to do something different. So this is a team event, and I say that 100%, that it is 100% a team. Our original team was Clyde Lane from the University of Tennessee. He has now retired. Dr. Jan Shearer, he's the extension beef veterinarian at Iowa State. Dr. Charlie Stoltenau, who at the time was our extension vet and is now our assistant director for Ag and Natural Resources, and Dave Workman and Jerry Yates from West Virginia University. Dave and Jerry had both been really involved in beef quality assurance, and I'd done some projects with them, and I knew that we needed a perspective from the eastern part of the country in a place that had probably more population and a more urban population than what we had. The interesting thing is that I did not know was that Dave Workman also is the PIO for their county's emergency response group and for the sheriff's department and the county emergency office, EM office, emergency management office. He also is a dispatcher, and so he brought a great deal of knowledge to the group. We researched what others have done. There wasn't a lot out there, some Canadian things, and some of it was really good and some of it needed some important improvement, but really the relevancy to our beef industry and to the US situation was a little bit lacking. And so we talked to and surveyed personnel who had been involved in these incidents and truckers and insurance companies and others, and learned really what we thought we needed to do. The plan identifies issues related to responder safety, public safety, and animal care and welfare. And one of the really interesting things is if you look at these materials related to Canada, and if you really watch what happens in Canada related to animal stewardship and welfare, animals generally come first in Canada and humans come second. And here we all agreed that human life is more important than animal life. And so while we all want to do right by animals, we also want people to leave the scene alive. And so that became a big tenet of what we focused on in this plan. It's a plan that has been developed to address issues related to dispatcher decision trees. So when that call comes into a dispatch office, they know the right questions to ask. And so, if they say that there's an accident with a stock trailer, well, maybe how big is that stock trailer? And is that stock trailer really a 60-foot pot, or is it a 16-foot stock trailer? Emergency response, scene assessment, security and containment, extrication of livestock, which is really what the first responders like to do most, and teaching them that containment of the scene is the most important thing, I will tell you, has been a little bit challenging. Euthanasia, relocation, mortality disposal, riding the vehicle and debriefing. And this plan is rigid enough to really cover the critical needs, but flexible enough to meet local needs. And so local needs like dealing with brand inspection and ownership issues, local needs like mortality disposal. Are you in a place that you absolutely cannot bury mortalities? Are you in a place where they have to be composted, and all of those things? And they have really, this thing has turned into almost being a continuing education program in some areas, and it's a one-day program that brings the curriculum and education and training materials to those who would respond to these incidents. And so interestingly, our group talked yesterday, and I should have probably ordered these, the list of these people. And the thing that we are finding where there's big success in implementing this plan and it's really working is that people come together as a group or a team to these meetings. That's a key to success, and that there's usually a pretty big driver with those who attend. And I can tell you one of the things, we did a BERP training in Laverne, Minnesota late September, early October, and they have implemented a complete BERP plan for the entire county in that short period of time. And really the drivers behind that, the impetus behind it, are a large animal veterinarian and a local cattle feeder. And they showed up to that meeting and they were so driven by this that they now have the county sheriff in line. They have everything figured out if one of these should happen. One has happened and things just work like clockwork. And so I think really it's important to have that team there. And we should probably have team up here at the very beginning because that's quite important. So the BERP program really helps attendees develop a list of assets, and I think that's important. Maybe one of the most important things, as Adele knows, I live in a very rural community, probably one of the most rural communities in South Dakota. Our closest neighbors are 14 miles away. Town is nearly 40 miles away. And we overturn a load of sheep almost every year at the same place in that community. And I always think to myself, I wonder if they've ever talked about that maybe that's a great place in the fall to set up some panels. So think about where you can house animals, who has panels, who has the knowledge on euthanasia, and all of those things. Who is your wrecker to help in these incidents? Think about where they happen in your community. A person called me yesterday, a producer who's on a volunteer fire department here in the central part of the state, and he said, we have to have this training in our community, and we should have it where every one of these accidents happens. I think in the 18 years I've been here, they've had at least 10 at the exact same place in a road, and he said, maybe we should have this training there. Train, and work together, and I think that team and working together is really important, and preparing for these things before they're actually needed is the most valuable part in this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the program evaluation, and I didn't really know how to go about this, what you all wanted, and if you want something different, please tell me and I'll be glad to get that to you. I'm going to talk about follow-up evaluations. So we had conducted trainings for about 100 individuals, and every single one of those individuals sent back a follow-up survey about 6 months later. And so we asked some key questions in there. One of those was if they had responded to an emergency incident involving cattle, did the training that they received in our program help them mitigate the event? And we learned that about 80% of the people who'd come to the training had dealt with an incident involving livestock, about 20% had dealt with an incident involving cattle, and about 85% of them said that that training helped. So it's a pretty high impact program. We ask about their knowledge before they attend the program and after they attend the program in these 9 areas. And the improvement in knowledge varies anywhere from about 40% to 80%, after they have attended the training. And I think that's very important. I think understanding why some of these things are important and understanding the educational value to why having some standard operating procedures really makes the training more valuable. We asked if they had made any changes to their response or potential response based upon attending the training, and that number varied anywhere from about 80% change to their response down to about 50%, depending on what they needed. And so it's helped us understand some places maybe where they have things in place, and some places where we need to work on our training a little bit. Interestingly, veterinarians, and especially regulatory veterinarians, get really concerned about biosecurity. And as a producer, it's important to me as well. But to most first responders, I don't know how you sell that. It's kind of like selling it to a producer. I think they don't really see the huge amount of value to that. After participating in the program, have they shared what they've learned? And about 80% of the participants have done that as well. And some feedback that we have received is, I think, the most impactful. And so the first of those, every time there's I think they call themselves a CART, SART maybe. Anyway, it's an animal response team in Virginia. And they have now sent every single person on their team to one of our trainings. And so the first person who had attended kind of went home and trained everybody else. And this was what she said. She said, every time the livestock panels go out, it's a learning experience for our fire department and law enforcement. They're gaining a lot of confidence in working with animals properly now, confidence they didn't have, and before the BERP class or interaction with BERP trained responders. And as we move this training, I think, into more cattle country or more rural areas, I think our knowledge of livestock and, livestock behavior is probably going to change a little bit, but, in the eastern part of the country, there's not a huge amount of knowledge in that area. This training also applies to all live animal incidents, not just bovine transport incident response. The biggest improvement I have seen so far has been the animal handling recommendations, thinking like an animal, and pin setup recommendations directly from the class to create a successful outcome. And we have a tabletop activity in this training where we set up scenarios. We take my daughter's all of her corral panels and her little animals, her cows and horses and sheep, and have a couple of dogs that we put in there. And we set up some scenarios that we think people might deal with in those areas. And we ask them what, it's a containment scenario. And we ask them what is correct about that containment and what isn't correct, and ask them to change it. And attendees really like that as well. We have a hands-on animal handling practicum and a euthanasia practicum. And no, we don't euthanize lots and lots of cattle at these things, although it might be kind of fun. We actually have a roping steer dummy that I have here in my office, and we call him Rufus. And I suppose Rufus has probably been killed well over 3,000 or 4,000 times over these trainings. And we use both a captive bolt and now an air rifle to teach the first responders euthanasia. As a veterinarian, it's crucial for us to know how to proceed when these emergencies occur, and much of what is covered is not emphasized in vet school. We learn some of the information, or we use some of the information learned to capture a horse that was loose on the highway. A highway patrolman said I shared some of the information with other officers at the State Police Academy. I believe it should be taught to all basic and cadets. And another person said we have extended our regional call-down list 3 layers for every potential need. We've also reviewed the organization on the scene so that there will be one chef and multiple levels of bottle washers. And that's one of the things that we hear quite a bit, is that there are a lot of chiefs on these scenes and not always a lot of really good organization. I need to talk about how this program is funded. We have definitely done this on the bare bones project. It was funded originally by a pilot project from our National Beef Quality Assurance Program through the Beef Checkoff as a matching grant to a USDA NIFA Smith Lever Special Needs Fund that we received. Our team member universities have given a lot to this, a lot of our time in particular. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association has donated us some meeting space and meeting times and those kind of things. Local and state farm bureaus have put some money towards it, along with Homeland's DHS grants, and local offices of emergency management, and then registration fees. So in summary, this program has been developed, and an associated educational program and plan go with it. Follow-up surveys show a high level of change in behavior, knowledge, extension, and changes in response. About 80% of the attendees have shared their knowledge with others. Between 55 and 80% have made changes to their response plans, and nearly 50% of improvement in the average knowledge or very knowledgeable levels across all the topic areas. We have continued to develop a Train the Trainer program. The first of our trained trainers will be out on their own this year, and so we'll see how that goes. And we're available to conduct programs upon request and train the trainers. So guess for my dairy friends, this is a dairy cow at one of my favorite dairies. Are there any questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat box, so I'll kick it off with the first question. Lisa, if someone wants to get started with emergency response training, like the BERP program, what do you suggest is the best way to get started?
I think the best way to get started is to figure out who the players are in your area or community. I think, is everybody, Kim, from either South Dakota or Nebraska in this group?
It looks like a lot are from South Dakota or Nebraska.
Okay. And so those are big counties, big rural counties often. I think if it were me, I would find places where livestock move a lot and then start the discussion. I do have a brochure that I'll send you, Kim, and you can share it with the group that talks about the program. A lot of times we all know where these accidents happen. I can almost guarantee you Adele and I know exactly where they happen in her area. And so I think I would start in those places, but I think starting the discussion to begin with is pretty important. Let's see, Adele says, how and when do you train the trainer? So and because we all do other things, this as much as we'd like for it to be our major job, it's not. Oh, sorry, I see another one of these on here. So I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't recognize your question as well. So what we have done is that our guidelines are that if you come to one of our training programs, we use that as a train the trainer, and then we require you to have one of us on our team come back out for your first trainings. And we are arguing over a fee schedule because some of us have to work in some states that are hurting more financially than others. And so this is a program that we're going to have to make a little bit self-sufficient, I think, here in the not too distant future. So we're working on that fee schedule for what it would be for participants to attend. I hope that made sense. If it didn't, please say so, Adele or Steve.
And Lisa, is there a website that people can go to access the Train the Trainer schedule, or what's the best way to access the Train the Trainer opportunity?
Well, here's the best way. Host a training in your area and we'll make you a Train the Trainer. That's the best way to do it, and that's what we have done before. Do I have a list of trainers from around the states? No, because they are pretty few, Rob, and actually we don't even have a website, and that came up to me last week, and I need to do that. So what I would recommend is that, for example, if Adele, and I don't know where Steve is, sorry, Steve, are you in South Dakota too? So I'm just going to make the general assumption. Oh, okay. He's, you cover all these states. Okay. So I'm going to say, if Adele and Robin, for example, in South Dakota wanted to take this thing on, I would try to optimize our time. So either Annie up with me in North Dakota so that we can bring in our trainers for a good week and use our travel time in a good fashion in our travel costs, or Annie up, say, with Rob in South Dakota or the guys over in Minnesota, or else host us for a week and, put one on in a place like Rapid City, Buffalo. I'm just going through towns that probably have major intersections, someplace like Murdo, and a lot of truck traffic, someplace around in there. That's what I would do, and it's a day-long program, and so it would need to be one location per day. We tried to do 2 a day once, and honest to gosh, there was just no way we could do it.
And Rob says that there's been discussion started in Nebraska to do like a train the trainer session.
Yep. So I guess I should say the train the trainers in the beginning are just our normal sessions. And then if you decide that you want to, we have said that the people who are trainers need to be involved, preferably with the Beef Quality Assurance Program, but definitely with Extension. And so come to one of our sessions, see what we do, see if that's part of what you want to do, and then we'll help you out and get started. So it's kind of a baptism under fire, if that makes sense.
I'm not seeing any additional questions or comments in the chat box. If you still have a comment or question, feel free to type it in. You will see in the chat box the link for the Animal Care Wednesday webinars, or the web page, which includes the webinars schedule as well as previously recorded webinars. We thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, Lisa, could you post?
Yeah, I'll put my contact information in here. Let's see here. I will say this, I want to tell you all how impressive it is that you all do this. I think it's really awesome, and I wish that we were doing something like this up here. So kudos on having this Animal Welfare Wednesday little get-together webinar session. I think that's pretty awesome.
And as a reminder, the first Wednesday of every month at 11 a.m. we have the Animal Care Wednesday webinars. Our next webinar is Wednesday, June 7th, so you can join us there. And Bob Coleman will be talking about equine nutrition basics, maximizing welfare and economics. So thank you for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you at future Animal Care Wednesday webinars.